Alright, welcome back. Today we're going to look at the non-land, non-planeswalker cards in the Commodore Guff Precon deck. We got a lot of ground to cover, so we got tons of cards to go through, as you can see here. I'll try and make it as quick as I can, but let's not mess around with it. Let's jump right in. Alright, so first we're going to get into the three enchantments in this entire deck. And they are Oath of Teferi, Oath of Gideon, and Oath of Jace. Oath of Teferi is a 5-cost legendary enchantment. When Oath of Teferi enters the battlefield, exile another target permanent you control. Return it to the battlefield under its owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. So, you play it, exile a permanent, return it at the end of your turn. What that does in the context of this deck with Planeswalkers. So let's say that I got a 5, let's say that I've built Commodore Guff up to a 7, right? Let's say Commodore Guff is at 7 loyalty counters. And I'm going to -3, and then I'm going to -3 again. So Commodore Guff is now at 1 loyalty counter. I can play Oath of Teferi, and I can exile him. And then when he enters the battlefield again, instead of being at 1 loyalty counter, he's going to be at 5 loyalty counters, and you can just reset the loyalty counters like that. Something to keep in mind is when you do that, you do not want to exile a Planeswalker that has more loyalty counters than its base number. Otherwise, Oath of Teferi, you'll just lose all those extra counters that you've built up. Oath of Teferi has a secondary ability. You may activate loyalty abilities of Planeswalkers you control twice each turn rather than only once. So that is very valuable right there for a 5-cost in the Azorius color, which is blue-white. Really great. Oath of Gideon is a 3-cost mono-white legendary enchantment. When Oath of Gideon enters the battlefield, create 2 1/1 white core ally creature tokens. Each Planeswalker you control enters the battlefield with an additional loyalty counter on it. Pretty straightforward, nothing complicated there. Creature generation, extra loyalty counters, boom. Oath of Jace is a 3-cost, again, legendary enchantment. When it enters the battlefield, draw 3 cards and then discard 2, so you end up keeping 1 of those cards. At the beginning of your upkeep, scry X, where X is the number of Planeswalkers you control. So you get some foreknowledge of what's going on in your deck, and the ability to put those cards onto the bottom of your library, kind of control what's coming. Plugging right along. After those enchantments, we have some unique mana rocks and some that are familiar. The 2 uniques are at least ones that you don't see every day. We have Honor-Worn Shaku, which is a 3-cost that does not enter tapped, and it has tap, add 1 colorless. It has a secondary ability of tap an untapped legendary permanent you control, untap Honor-Worn Shaku. So Planeswalkers being tapped does nothing, but they are legendary permanents. So tap a Planeswalker, tap this, get a colorless. Tap a Planeswalker you control, untap this, tap it again, get another colorless. And you can do that for as many Planeswalkers as you have, and use Honor-Worn Shaku to build up a solid number of colorless mana, depending on how many Planeswalkers you have. The other one is Gatewatch Beacon, which is a 3-cost white artifact that enters the battlefield with 3 loyalty counters on it. It taps to add 1 white mana, but it has a unique ability. Whenever a Planeswalker enters the battlefield under your control, if Gatewatch Beacon has loyalty counters on it, you may move a loyalty counter from Gatewatch Beacon onto that Planeswalker. So, boom, playing Commodore Guff, moving a loyalty counter from here onto there, now it's a 6. Pretty simple and straightforward. Now we get into some of the more basic mana rocks. Felwar Stone, which is a 2-cost that taps to add 1 mana of any color that a land an opponent controls could produce. Quintessential Soul Ring, pay 1, tap, add 2 colorless. Wayfarer's Bauble, which is a 1-cost artifact that has pay 2 and tap. Sacrifice Wayfarer's Bauble, search your library for a basic land card, put that card onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle your library. And then we have the 4 signets: Arcane, Izzet, Azorius, and Boros. The Arcane signet taps for 1 mana of any color in your commander's identity. The Azorius, Boros, and Izzet have pay 1 colorless and tap the artifact to add 1 mana of each of the colors of the respective Rakdos, or the respective guild. Blue-white, white-red, and then blue-red over here. All of these signets are 2 costs across the board. We also have the 3 talismans associated with the Jeskai colors: Talisman of Progress, Talisman of Creativity, and Talisman of Conviction here. Now, Talisman of Progress, all 3 of these are 2 costs. They tap for a colorless, and they can be also tapped for 1 color of the respective guilds: white-blue, blue-red, white-red. But when you tap it for a colored mana, it deals... the talismans deal 1 damage to you. So, those are good for the spread. I don't personally care for the taking the damage, but there are other ways of doing it, I feel like, with the signets, or other ramp cards. So then we have 2 other miscellaneous ramp-based cards here. Cartographer's Hawk, which is a 2-cost 2/1 with flying. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player who controls more lands than you, you may return it to its owner's hand. If you do, search your library for a Plains card, put it onto the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle your library. So I'm going to go ahead and swing at this at my opponent. It's going to deal damage. That player has more lands than I do. I'm going to put this back in my hand so I can recast it, and I'm going to dive for a Plains, put it onto the battlefield tapped, and shuffle my library. And then Oreskos Explorer, which is a 2-cost, slide that over, is a 2-cost that when it enters the battlefield, search your library for up to X Plains cards, where X is the number of players who control more lands than you. Notice it's the X is the number of players, not the number of lands discrepancy there is. So if they have 3 more lands than you do, or they have 1 more land than you do, it's still just going to be 1 for each player. So you're going to search your library for X Plains cards, where X is the number of players who controlled more lands than you. Reveal those cards, put them into your hand, and then shuffle. So you're putting them into your hand, not your battlefield, and then shuffling your library. Alright. Moving on from ramp, we have some blocking specialty creatures in Fogbank and Wall of Denial. Fogbank is a 2-cost blue 0/2 with Defender and Flying, but prevent all combat damage that would be dealt to and by Fogbank. Thing to note about Fogbank is it doesn't really defend very well against Trample. What it does do is if you have a 150 non-trample creature, you can block with Fogbank. Fogbank will survive. Fogbank will survive Death Touch. Fogbank will survive Burn. Nope, it won't because it's combat damage. But Fogbank is very survivable if you block a creature that has Trample and the damage that is incoming exceeds 2, then it'll just carry over. So it'll just function just like normal Trample would. The creature will hit you, it'll deal 2 less damage than it would normally. Fogbank will still survive, but that damage will just be dealt. The damage won't be dealt to Fogbank, but it'll just carry over, steamrolling right over the top of you. Wall of Denial is a Azorius, which is white-blue. It's a 0/8 defender with flying, but it also has Shroud, which means that it can't be the target of spells or abilities. Worth noting, a lot of people I've found miss this. Shroud and Hexproof are different. Hexproof means that your opponents can't target it with spells or abilities. Shroud means that nobody can, not even you. So a creature with Shroud you can't equip to, you can't sacrifice target creature, you can sacrifice a creature, but you can't sacrifice target creature. So anything that's target at all, you or your opponents can't touch it. So very good with the protection on both of these, especially for their mana costs. This deck also features a cloning card. You may have Spark Double enter the battlefield as a copy of a creature or planeswalker you control, except it enters the battlefield with an additional 1/1 counter on it if it's a creature, and it enters with an additional loyalty counter on it if it's a planeswalker, and it isn't legendary. So, legendary creature, legendary planeswalker, it doesn't matter. You can, with Spark Double, just negate that legendary rule for this particular creature, and you just duplicate it. So you can duplicate a planeswalker or a creature, legendary or not, doesn't matter. 4-cost blue, very useful card, especially for that planeswalker duplication ability, and entering with that additional loyalty counter. Next up, we have some legendary creatures here. The first one is Leori, Spark-Touched Hunter, and Narset, Enlightened Master. So, starting with Leori is a 3-cost Jeskai, tricolor. 3/3 with Flying and Vigilance. When it deals combat damage to a player, choose a Planeswalker type. So, Guff, Chandra, Narset, Jace, etc., etc. Until end of turn, whenever you activate an ability of a Planeswalker of that type, copy that ability. You may choose new targets for the copy. So that's activated ability, so none of the passive abilities would work. But if you were to choose, for example, Guff, you could be like, boom, -3. Cool. So -3, I'm going to trigger this ability twice. So that's very good for that doubling ability there. Instead of having to trigger it twice, you just -3 and then execute it twice. So you don't have to pay the cost twice, I mean. So that's very useful, especially for only a 3-cost on a 3/3 here. And then Narset, Enlightened Master is always nasty, no matter what it's in. It's a 6-cost 3/2, First Strike and Hexproof. Whenever Narset, Enlightened Master attacks, exile the top 4 cards of your library. Until end of turn, you may cast non-creature spells from among those cards without paying their mana costs. So most of this deck is non-creature spells. So you'll be able to get a lot of mileage off of this Narset in this deck. Get a lot of free casts. Drop some of your more spendy planeswalkers. Narset is just fire, in my opinion, in this case. So, next up, we have a couple of cards that deal with proliferating and doubling of counters. We have Grateful Apparition, Deep Glow Skate, Flux Glow Channeler, and Thrumming Bird. Grateful Apparition is a 2-cost white 1/1 flying spirit. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player or planeswalker, proliferate, which is choose any number of counters on players or permanents in the game, and give each of them one more of a kind of counter that they had. So that'll hit your loyalty counters. Deep Glow Skate is a 5-cost 3/3. When it enters the battlefield, double the number of each kind of counter on any number of target permanents. So that you drop that and your planeswalkers just double in size immediately. Flux Channeler is a 3-cost 2/2. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, proliferate. So, okay, drop a planeswalker. Then I'm going to run proliferate again. And good old Thrumming Bird, classic proliferate card. It's a 2-cost 1/1 with flying. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player, proliferate. Exactly like Grateful Apparition, except for Grateful Apparition will also trigger when you deal combat damage to a planeswalker. So with these, you're going to be able to make your planeswalkers just generally build faster. But we also have some very useful protection cards and graveyard return cards and control cards. So I'll go through these, a couple of them at a time, because there's a number of them here. First one is Anarchy Oathkeeper. I think it's Anarchy. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that one right. But it's a 2-cost 0/4. Creatures can't attack planeswalkers you control unless their controller pays 1 for each creature they control that's attacking a planeswalker you control. It's sort of like a miniaturized ghostly prison for planeswalkers. It has a secondary ability of pay 6, exile it from your graveyard, return target planeswalker card from your graveyard to the battlefield. So you get a little bit of graveyard return, you get a little bit of protection, which is really useful, but not quite as useful as Silent Arbiter. This is the nightmare of decks that revolve around attacking. Silent Arbiter is a 4-cost 1/5 colorless artifact creature. No more than one creature can attack each combat, and no more than one creature can block each combat. Newsflash, in case you missed it, this is not a creature-based deck, which means that you are limiting the amount of combat damage your opponents can do. The likelihood that you have a blocker is pretty darn high, especially with like Elspeth and all your token gens, right? So if a player can only attack with one creature, you only need to block with one creature. And so this effectively allows you to manage your deck not being a creature-based deck, but still being able to handle mass tokens and other strategies that rely on having a whole bunch of creatures on the battlefield. Another one of similar vein is to the previous one. Kazul, Tyrant of the Cliffs, is a 5-cost 5/4 legendary. Whenever a creature an opponent controls attacks, if you are the defending player, create a 3/3 red ogre creature token unless that creature's controller pays 2. Pays 3, not 2. So, if your opponent is attacking you, he declares his attackers. He can either pay 3 mana, or you get a 3/3 red creature that you can then declare immediately as a blocker. And that happens for each creature. It's not just whenever they attack lump sum. It's if they're attacking you with 3 creatures, a creature an opponent controls is being declared as attacking. Trigger, trigger, trigger. So this will build up really fast, and the more creatures they try and attack you with, the less likely they will be to be able to pay that extra mana. And if they do pay that extra mana, then they're seriously limiting the amount of board state increment that they're going to be able to lay down this turn. So, absolutely very valuable protection card, and it goes right along here with Mangara, the Diplomat, which is a 4-cost white legendary 2/4 with lifelink. Whenever an opponent attacks with creatures, if 2 or more of those creatures are attacking you and or planeswalkers you control, draw a card, and whenever an opponent casts their second spell each turn, draw a card. So, lots of card draw there, a little bit of protection. It's not as much protection as the other two, but if your opponents are sick and tired of you drawing cards and playing lots of planeswalker spells, they might think twice there. So, now we have a couple of combat utility cards that will take your planeswalkers and utilize them for your own swings. We already talked about how Sarkhan can cause all of your planeswalkers to become 4/4 dragons for a turn, or until end of turn. Well, this is a 3-cost 0/5 creature. At the beginning of combat on your turn, you may choose any number of target planeswalkers you control. Until end of turn, they become 3/3 blue bird creature tokens. Sorry, not tokens. 3/3 blue bird creatures with flying, hexproof, and whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, scry 1. So, if we don't have Sarkhan, we can have them become 3/3 bird creatures with flying. And we can use those to swing. At the beginning of combat on your turn, that just happens. It's not a loyalty ability. It's not a planeswalker. But this can be particularly useful for getting some flying, swinging damage in. We also have Jaya's Phoenix, which is a 5-cost 3/3 with flying and haste. Whenever Jaya's Phoenix deals combat damage to a player or planeswalker, copy the next loyalty ability you activate this turn. When you activate it, you may choose new targets for the copy. Whenever you cast a Planeswalker spell, you may return Jaya's Phoenix from your graveyard to the battlefield. So we get some more loyalty ability duplication here, some graveyard utility, and lots of swinging to trigger that combat damage. So very helpful. We also have a board wipe, or a virtual board wipe. Promise of Loyalty is a 5-cost sorcery. Each player puts a vow counter on a creature they control and sacrifice the rest. Each of those creatures can't attack you or planeswalkers you control for as long as it has a vow counter on it. So it's like a mixture of goad and board wipe all at the same time. And so this can be used in a lot of different situations to get rid of a whole lot of pesky things, while not being as board wipey as it could be. But whatever is left after you board wipe, it just can't attack you. It's not goaded, so it has to attack another opponent if able. It just straight up no. It cannot attack you for whatever reason. And very powerful. But the other thing too is it sacrifices the rest, forces your opponents to sacrifice the rest. That will get around indestructible as well, because instead of destroy, it's force sack. It'll also get around hexproof and shroud, because instead of target, it is also just each and sacrifice. So, and you're not targeting anything. So I love this in this deck as a board wipe. I just love this just generally. Next up, we have Urza's Ruinous Blast, which is a 5-cost white legendary sorcery. Exile all non-land permanents that are not legendary. So exile all non-legendary permanents. Well, all of your planeswalkers are legendary, and so you can play this and clear most of your opponent's board states. Deploy the Gatewatch is a 6-cost sorcery. Look at the top 7 cards of your library. Put up to 2 planeswalker cards from among them onto the battlefield. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. So basically, it's sort of like a one-off, I'm going to scry and put all planeswalkers onto the battlefield. Sort of a thing. So, without casting or dealing with their mana cost. So, for a 6-cost, depending on what you hit, it's kind of hit or miss. But if it lands, it can just be super good. Alright, we're getting down there. I'm trying to go as fast as I can here. We have a total of 9 cards left here. So I'll try and blast right through them here. Blasphemous Act is a 9-cost sorcery. This spell costs 1 less to cast for each creature on the battlefield. So if there's a bunch of creatures on the battlefield, you can cast this for 1. Blasphemous Act deals 13 damage to each creature. We are not a creature deck. We are a Planeswalker deck. Planeswalkers do not get hit by Blasphemous Act, and so Blasphemous Act can be a pseudo board wipe for a 1-cost. Very helpful. Helps protect you, helps protect your Planeswalkers. The next one is Swords to Plowshares. This is like almost a baseline quintessential white card for Commander. I've only seen a couple of decks that I've built or that I haven't built that haven't had this in that have been white. It's a 1-cost exile target creature. Its controller gains life equal to its power. And its sibling, Path to Exile, 1-cost, exile target creature. Instead of its controller gaining life equal to its power, its controller instead searches their library for a basic land card, puts it onto the battlefield tapped, and then shuffles their library. We then have Semester's End, which is a 4-cost white instant. Exile any number of target creatures and or planeswalkers you control. At the beginning of the next end step, return each of them to the battlefield under its owner's control. Each of them enters the battlefield with an additional 1/1 counter on it if it's a creature, and an additional loyalty counter on it if it's a planeswalker. This is a sort of, I'm going to use all of my minus abilities on one turn, and then I'm going to play this, and so they're going to come back and they're all going to be refreshed and not in nearly as much danger of being killed. And I'm going to be able to use all those really powerful minus abilities. We're just going to reset, refresh, boom, call it good. Next up is Guff Rewrites History, which is a 3-cost red instant. For each player, choose target non-enchantment, non-land permanent that player controls. Those permanents' owners shuffle them into their libraries. Each player who controlled one of those permanents exiles cards from the top of their library until they exile a non-land card. Then they put the rest on the bottom of their library in a random order. Each player may cast the non-land card they exiled without paying its mana cost. It's similar to a Mass Chaos Warp. Except for it does count as the spell being cast, not just putting the permanent onto the battlefield. It hits each player, and it specifies non-enchantment, non-land. So that's a distinguishing difference there. And it guarantees that what comes out of it is a non-land card, whereas Chaos Warp is just permanent. But for a 3-cost, still really nice. You can use that to hit your opponents and help maintain that board state there. We have Repeated Reverberation, which is a 4-cost instant. When you next cast an instant spell, create a sorcery spell. Oh my goodness. When you next cast an instant spell, I cannot speak today. Cast a sorcery spell or activate a loyalty ability this turn. When you next cast an instant spell, cast a sorcery spell, or activate a loyalty ability this turn. Copy that spell or ability twice. So you get a total of 3 instances of that spell or ability. And you may choose new targets for the copies. Sorry, I have been going at this and talking really fast for a long time. Having trouble keeping my mouth going the speed of my brain here. My apologies. This triples a instant, sorcery, or loyalty ability that you use. Just pay for it, boom, and then triple. Notice it does say when you next cast or use. So when you play this, the next thing that you do is what's going to get tripled. You can't play this and then do some things and then trigger what you want. It's this and then immediately trigger what you're doing. And you can't trigger what you're doing and then play this. You have to play this and then immediately trigger. Because if you trigger it and then you play this, you've already activated it, you've already put it on the stack, and then when you resolve it, it doesn't quite work that way. Because by the time this ability resolves, whatever it is you're trying to duplicate will have also already resolved. So that's important to note. Next, we have Norn's Annex, which is a 5-cost white artifact. Notice that the white are Phyrexian symbols, which means you can either pay a white mana or 2 life for each one. Creatures can't attack you or planeswalkers you control unless their controller pays either white or 2 life for each of those creatures. Can be really effective against non-white decks. Can also be just really effective against white decks because it specifies it has to be either white or paying 2 life instead of colorless like Ghostly Prison and things. So that is great for your protection, controlling what creatures and things are able to hit you and how many of them, and very much restricting and limiting your opponent's options based on how much mana he has and how much he wants to spend during the rest of his turn. We have Nevinral's Disc, which is a 4-cost artifact when it enters the battlefield tapped. And it has pay 1, colorless, and tap, destroy all artifacts, creatures, and enchantments. Very simple board wipe. And the last card in non-land card that we haven't hit in this deck is the Chain Veil. It is a 4-cost legendary artifact with, at the beginning of your end step, if you didn't activate a loyalty ability of a Planeswalker this turn, you lose 2 life. It also has pay 4 and tap. For each Planeswalker you control, you may activate one of its loyalty abilities once this turn, as though none of its loyalty abilities have been activated this turn. Basically, that translates to you may activate loyalty abilities an additional time if you pay for and tap for that turn. Whew. All right. Sorry about the length of that one. I tried to rush through it as quickly as I could. Got my tongue tied up there a couple of times. But we've made it through. That is all of the non-land cards between this video and the previous video. Thank you guys for bearing with me. Next video, we're going to go over the land cards, but I'm curious to hear what you guys are thinking about some of these cards and these videos here. Do you guys like the decks that are coming up? Do you feel like the creators of these decks put a whole bunch of time and effort? Which ones did you think? I'm really curious to hear what other people think, not just my opinions and thoughts on these decks. This deck in particular, as I mentioned in the previous video, I really, really am happy with the Commodore Guff deck. I feel like they could have done a little bit better in some cases, but for a Precon that is not designed to be a fully it's not designed to be a super fine-tuned deck. It's pretty fine-tuned. But enough about that. I'll catch you guys in the next video doing the lands and then a last overview of the Commodore. Thanks for watching, bearing with me with this one. Like and subscribe. Catch you next time.